Introducing the remarkable archetype, the dangerous gentleman. With a demeanor that commands respect and a hint of potency, he embodies strength tempered by virtue. Though his capabilities could veer towards danger, he channels his power for noble causes, serving others and safeguarding those in need. Rooted in a profound love for both God and humanity, he navigates life with discipline and purpose. In his presence, one witnesses the harmonious blend of power and benevolence, a testament to the true essence of masculinity. Step into the world of the dangerous gentleman, where strength is wielded for righteousness, and discover a captivating embodiment of honor and valor. Hello, and welcome to the Dangerous Gentleman podcast. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly did earn it. Triggers. That's what we're going to talk about today. And chances are, when I said that word, it triggered something inside of you that may or may not have been positive or negative. It just triggered something. You see, there's a lot of people that talk about triggers a lot. Everyone brings it up all the time. Oh, this action triggered me. This word triggered me. That person, by their very presence, triggered me. That food, whatever it is, triggered me. And they use it like they have a uncontrollable response. And while there is an instantaneous response that when these things happen to us, there's an immediate response that happens. Positive, negative, any one of a number of different reactions can occur inside of us when something triggers us. Really, what we're saying is that this reminds me of that. And it can cause physiological reactions. It can cause your heart rate to go up. It can cause your mouth to salivate when you see or smell certain foods. You can start to sweat, changes in body temperature, all that kind of stuff. One of the questions that they used to ask on a lot of the tests back when I was in chiropractic school was, which of the following things will cause a change in blood pressure? And it might be consuming a hamburger, or seeing your wife for the first time that day, or beginning a bout of exercise. And it was always a trick question because the bottom answer was always all of the above. And that was always the correct answer, because anything and everything that we see, smell, taste, touch, feel changes and alters our blood pressure. So in some ways, that is a trigger. But the problem is that people these days seem to use the word trigger as an excuse for certain actions. They will see somebody and they will say, oh, that triggered me. And then they go and they do something that is outside of their behavior, or something that has a negative effect on them, or a negative effect on other people. They'll get angry, or whatever it is that it triggered them. And while there is some truth to the idea that our sensory experiences cause a reaction in us, what we do with that reaction, how we go from there, is on us. What happens, what we do with that trigger, is on us. There is a moment in time where we see or smell when we are triggered, and there is a physiological response, and then how we react to that is on us. The initial reaction is oftentimes outside of our control, but what we do from there, that's on us. It's like one of my earlier episodes where I talked about explanations versus excuses. So a lot of the things that happen to us as we grew up and stuff like that, it explains our behavior, but it doesn't make it okay. The same thing is real with triggers. It doesn't give us an excuse for a bad reaction. It doesn't give us an excuse to lose our cool. It doesn't give us an excuse to go drinking if we're trying to not drink. It doesn't give us an excuse to fall into bad coping mechanisms. Okay? So recently, I want to share just a little bit of a testimony, a little bit of a personal story So I was at a church conference. I was visiting a different church, and they were taking communion. And generally speaking, like as a recovering alcoholic, I choose to drink grape juice for communion instead of wine. And I made the assumption that the communion that they were serving was going to be grape juice. And so I took one little communion cup half full and I took a swig of it. And it was not grape juice, it was wine. And there was an instantaneous response that I had no control over. My head went fuzzy, and all of the physiological sensations that I used to get when I would drink and do drugs all came rushing back. The first word that popped into my brain was more. My brain and my body wanted more of that. And that I couldn't control. That physiological response was something that was beyond anything that I could control. But what I did from there is what I had the opportunity to control. And I could have taken that and allowed it to just spiral me out of control. I could have gone, well, I've had alcohol now. I am no longer sober. My streak is broken and I got to start over at day one. So since I got to start over at day one, I might as well go all the way. I might as well go buy a fifth or a six pack or some weed or whatever it is. I could have gone in to do that. And trust me, those thoughts went spiraling through my brain faster than I could control. I had to get up and I walked out of the back of the room and I had to take a couple of deep breaths. Fortunately, there were some other men that were there with me and they knew my history with alcohol. They knew my commitment to sobriety and they instantaneously came up and talked to me. They knew what was going, well, at least some. They knew that something was going through my brain. They knew that I had thoughts and emotions and they talked to me about it. And they talked me to the best of their ability. They helped reassure me and they helped get my heart rate calmed down, my breathing back under control. And I didn't overreact. I allowed myself to sit in that and process through it. And one of the thoughts that I had a few minutes after that was, yep, now I know that I can never drink again because my body would still want more. And this was after 7.5 years of no alcohol. And in an instant, my brain went there. And I called my sponsor and left him a message. And he called me back a few minutes later and he talked me through it. He said, Andrew, you're still sober. He said, I had the same thing happen to me at a church a few years back. And he had had a lot longer time in recovery than me. And he said, it still happened to him. He said, you're still sober. You didn't choose that to happen. If you go do something about it, if you go chasing alcohol again, then that's on you. If you allow that trigger to alter the course of your future or your decisions or your actions, then you lose to that. But if you allow this to just wash over you, process through it, maybe hit a couple of meetings, write it out, then you'll be fine. So that was an experience I had with triggers, and that was about a month ago. And I could have let it spiral, right? There's a lot of people who would have used that as an excuse to go drink or whatever it is. We see that a lot all over in society, all over in our culture. Someone wears a certain hat. You may know what I'm talking about when I say that. Someone simply has to wear a hat, and then all of a sudden, all these people are triggered and they get mad at that person because of that hat. It triggers anger. It triggers all of these negative emotions. They let a hat dictate their emotions. They let a hat be more powerful than they are. An inanimate object has power over them. That trigger has power over them. For years after I went through losing my kids and stuff like that, I would, if I walked through a store and there was a toy aisle, a response would happen. I would have a physiological response. And often I would just be walking through the store and no one else could see it, but my eyes would start to tear up a little bit. And because I'd be thinking about my kids and all that stuff. And so I tried to avoid it. There were certain days like, oh, this is my kid's birthday and I don't get to see them. This is the anniversary of whatever this thing was, And I had all these dates, all of these things that were anniversaries that reminded me of things in the past that were negative, right? And for years, like, it would just consume me. And I would spend minutes, hours, I would just spend all day like thinking about all of that stuff and reliving all of the emotions and replaying the movies, right? And I would try to avoid it and I would try to get away from it. Eventually, I learned that the best thing that I could do, the one way that I could get past that, is I started to have to face those things. And it would be that day that something had happened. And I would wake up and I would start to feel the emotion and I would start to try to avoid it. And I would try to do all these things. And then it would just keep popping up all day. The memories would pop up on Facebook and it would just keep triggering that same response over and over and over again. And I would try to avoid it. And that's when it was relentless. But then I learned a very powerful lesson. Those days would come, those things that would remind me of my kids and my marriage and all of those times before, they would come and they would hit me. And I had to, instead of running away from them, I would look them in the eye. I mean, I would face them and I would have a very brief conversation in my head that went something like, I see you, I know that you're there, and I'm going to allow myself to sit in this for the appropriate amount of time, and then I'm going to go on to the rest of my day, and I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to execute. I'm going to do what I have to do. And guess what? Instead of running from that memory, instead of running from that trigger all day long and fighting it constantly, when I took the time and I gave it its place, but I didn't allow it to go past that, guess what? It stopped triggering me. It stopped when I took the time to give it its place, and I started to do that regularly. It became a habit. I built that muscle of dealing with those triggers, and I got stronger and stronger and stronger. In the beginning, like that time that I have to deal with it, that time that I have to give it has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter over time. So now those things come up and I can look them in the face and I can say, all right, here you go. Go on with the rest of my day. I think that's a healthy way to process it because I give it its place. I'm not running from it anymore. I give it its place and I move on. That power of that trigger has gone away. Yes, it still happens, but it doesn't have power over me. I'm in a chat group, and there was a guy who posted a picture of a donut. It's about nutrition and health and all that kind of stuff. And the guy said, man, I saw a donut and I just wanted it. And it brought up all the emotions. It's like, how do I deal with this? And so I brought up a lesson that I had learned that has really worked for me. And it's in relationship to what I shared about the hat. Like, it's a donut. It's literally an inanimate object made out of flour, sugar, water, and various and assorted other ingredients. That thing does not have power over you. That thing is weak. It is literally an inanimate object. Don't give it its place. You are stronger. And if you are not more powerful than a donut, then you're pretty weak. Or whatever it is that you're facing. And yeah, some things are legit. Some things, like, they can be very powerful. Like in an alcoholic, like in my experience with alcohol. Alcohol has a stronger pull on me than donuts do. And so, because it triggers a certain physiological response for me, alcohol does. I know that now. But I've applied this in my life a lot. There's a lot of things that I just look at them now and I'm like, I could eat a donut. And I'm not saying that I never do. I'm not saying that I don't every once in a while indulge in one of those things. But it's when I choose to, not when that donut exerts power over me, because it doesn't have any power over me. And so I was able to share that. And the guy's like, I am keeping that. Like, I am more powerful than a donut. And we give way too much power to things that most of the time we have no control over. If we walk into a donut shop and we smell and we stare at the donuts, that's on us, right? But if we're driving down the road and there is a billboard advertising alcohol, I don't necessarily have any control over that. But I can declare myself more powerful than that billboard. But I can't avoid it. It might be on my way to work. There are triggers and there are things that we can't avoid. Some we can. But if we put ourselves in harm's way enough, if we keep putting ourselves, if we keep intentionally triggering ourselves, that's on us. And it becomes much more difficult to overcome those things. One more quick thing that I want to share. And this is about a time when I didn't overcome a trigger. And it was literally within the last couple of days. So in the past, in dealing with my ex-wife and all the drugs and the alcohol, she became a liar. And she would lie about anything and everything. Even when she was caught in a lie, she would lie about lying. And then she would lie about lying about lying. And so it was this constant just web of lies. And when I found out the things that were going on that she was lying about, like there were certain emotions that came up and very difficult to deal with. Very painful for me. So I was in this group conversation with a bunch of guys on Zoom the other night, and we caught this guy in a lie. And then he lied about lying. And then he lied about lying again. And all those emotions, all of that stuff that hit me before when I found out about my ex-wife, all of that came rushing back. And I had to fight back anger. I had to fight so hard. I wanted to literally reach through the phone and do something to this, I'm going to call him a kid, to this young man. I felt so triggered. I had to take some deep breaths. I had to move on. I had to say what I needed to say without losing my cool. And I did, and we dealt with it. And he, at this point, is kicked out of the group, as is reasonable, it seems, because it's supposed to be a group of men who operate under high levels of integrity, right? And this guy was not operating under any kind of reasonable level of integrity. I wish I could say that I just got over that. I wish I could say that I was able to take a couple deep breaths and move on, but I wasn't. I allowed those emotions to trigger some very negative actions. No, I didn't lose my sobriety, but I lost a bunch of sleep. I ended up, I won't get into the actions and I won't get into where it led my thoughts, but it consumed me for several hours, disrupting my sleep. And sleep is precious to me. But I didn't win that battle. I didn't win that battle. So, final thoughts on triggers. Triggers happen. We have to learn how to deal with them. We have to face them. We have to acknowledge that we are quote unquote triggered, but that doesn't excuse us. That doesn't give us an out to do something stupid or to make some bad choices and decisions. We have to be able to face that trigger and say, you are not more powerful than me. And we have to be able to move on from it. And the way that happens is by putting in the reps. Yes, I'm using another gym metaphor, but we got to put in the reps. The trigger comes, we lift that weight, and we get stronger in dealing with it because we make a choice in the moment. to not let it beat us. That is a rep. That's how we get stronger. We don't let ourselves use that as an excuse. We see it as a rep and we get stronger. And pretty soon we've overcome the unhealthy coping mechanisms that trigger used to trigger. And we've built healthy, positive coping mechanisms now to be able that, oh, that thing happens, healthy coping mechanism. I call somebody, I talk to somebody, I write something out, right? We develop healthy coping mechanisms. So first we have to face it. We got to put in the reps to overcome it. And then we have to replace the unhealthy coping mechanisms with healthy coping mechanisms. And that's how you deal with triggers. They're not inevitable. That's what makes me sick about, is when people say that they have a trigger as if they have like their response and their reaction is inevitable. It's not. You have the strength. You have the ability to overcome that trigger. And so that's my encouragement to you. Do the reps. So put in the reps, and don't let triggers be excuses. I hope you got something out of this, and I'll talk to you again next time.
So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.